Zach with Wingard Wearables. You're one of 12 special people who's going to watch this video to the end, because today we're talking about war clubs, and not just me talking about war clubs. We brought another person into this, Ernest Gendron. He has made many war clubs. He's made even a war club that I possess, and he knows so much more about war clubs than I. And, you know, we wanted to pull him in to talk about traditional war clubs and a special collaboration that he's got going on with Wingard Wearables. So turning it over, Ernest, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Zach. It is an honor, and I'm very happy to be on your channel. I've been a big fan of Wingard Wearables and your tomahawks and everything that you've been doing for a while. And I can proudly say that I am one of the 12. So we might be down to 11 today. But, you know.
We're going to share it with a friend at the end. There'll be 13 people that have watched this at the end of it.
That's right. Perfect. Since I'm here, yeah, somebody's got to take my spot.
Yeah.
So I learned about you through Instagram, and so for me on Instagram, I am the coyote.child or coyote child on Instagram, and so on there you'll see a lot of the things that I do there, mostly making traditional weapons and tools from both the northeastern woodlands and from the plains is kind of the areas that I focus on. And, I try to have an authentic focus to the weapons that I make. I'm always been interested in sort of the traditional, mail rolls and mail arts and things like that. So, making weapons has been kind of a natural outgrowth of that. And so I'm Abenaki and Nehiopod and also French from up in Canada. So that's a little bit about myself and sort of the things that you'll expect from my Instagram. Mostly weapons, bows and arrows.
Well, and out of those weapons, what got you so interested in war clubs? Like, how did it start for you?
Right. Well, war clubs, traditional clubs has really been something that, more even than I think bows and arrows or anything else. That's been kind of my laser focus. I've always been, from a kid, I've always been interested in, clubs, tomahawks, swords and things like that too, just like hand weapons. I wasn't as interested in, projectile stuff, but just kind of the ethic of, the hand-to-hand sort of stuff is what I was interested in, even from, being a kid. Kind of weird, but, it's the kind of stuff that I was into. Yeah. Even from being little. And, it's a lot of like role models and leaders and things like that I think I learned about, people like Tecumseh, Crazy Horse, and, some of the big names that you hear about. And, they're always mentioned as, carrying war clubs and things, those traditional kind of weapons. And so that was something that I was really interested in, and just had been, I think, maybe genetically just kind of drawn to those things. And, for people, particularly up in the northeastern woodlands and things like that, Abenaki, the clubs are really like a symbol of, masculinity, of being a warrior, of, the defense of the nation. Reputations were built, fighting with the clubs, and also have a lot of meaning in terms of sacrifice, and also with the love spiritual things too. So it's been something that's just like grown and grown and grown, from that initial interest.
So yeah, my journey into weapons also started as a child. I watched Last of the Mohicans when I was, I think, like 8.
Classic.
Yeah. I had tomahawks on the brain ever since. But you did mention like sort of the a little bit in the DNA, and I have no Native American heritage or background, but I do think there is something in a significant portion of the male population that is drawn to war clubs, especially like this style of war club. There's just something about it that, like, my wife has no appreciation for this. I can't think of any woman who, and I don't know about your wife, but women, carrying these around and being drawn to them. It seems to be a very, like you just get it in your hands and you just feel this something primal connection in the brain. And it must go back to what our ancestors had to do, before they even had bladed weapons. Like every culture had a war club of some kind. So I do wonder if that's part of that, sort of primal in the DNA appeal.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's, it's kind of something beautiful too about taking something that's like from the land, a living tree, in this case, but taking something that's from the land, and then you create a weapon with which to also defend, your land, your territory, your family, whatever it is. And I do like a good stick, and I've always, always been attracted to that. I think there's something there with, connection between the wood and honestly, I mean, war club more than, a lot of other kind of weapons, even, to me personally, there might be people that disagree, but to me personally, more than a lot of other weapons, it's like an extension of the body. And so, when you're wielding it, when you're using it, it really feels like an extension of your body more than it does even just only a weapon, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can remember the first time I got this war club was made by Corey Busey. This was before you were on my radar, but I remember the first time taking this to my body opponent bag, and it really did feel like an extra section of my arm, and it felt like throwing, like as intuitive as throwing a ball at somebody, but you held onto the ball, and the ball was on this stiff lever arm, and that connection was just so natural, really incredible. And, I guess that gets into, if you want to get into how your background on traditional war clubs, like, how you got started into making them and what you learned about them. I mean, that would be great if you could get into that.
Yeah. So for me, starting out, it was just, I wanted to work, I wanted the weapons. I never thought about, selling clubs. I never thought about, manufacturing them like large scale or anything like that, like making, however many I've made at this point. For me, it just started off, wanting to have something that, felt and looked like one of our traditional weapons. And, looking around at that time, where could I get something like that? Going to powwows, things like that. I wasn't finding anything that really looked and felt like, the traditional ones that you see in museums and all of that. It didn't have that sort of, energy about them. So I felt like, well, maybe I'm just going to have to make one for myself. And so then it became like this process, where you start making them, and then you want to make it better and better. And then once you start doing that, it becomes kind of a discipline, and it can be almost, you can get obsessive about things. And so it was something that I was doing, and I was also making bows and arrows and things as well. But the clubs was really what was fueling it. It was like my favorite kind of thing to do. And so I would start doing educational things as well, and sometimes do demonstrations at different historic sites, museums, things like that. And so then that, later on, I was able to actually start getting into museum collections and seeing, other clubs and things like that firsthand. And so it's just been an ongoing education, really.
That's awesome. And how did you get into selling them?
Well, I've done a lot of different jobs and things like that over the years, as I think a lot of people can relate. So, it was something that just sort of grew. I was moving furniture for quite a while in Texas, and so where I was living at the time, and with some of the like museums and historic sites, I was doing demonstrations, education type things where I just talk about some of our traditional culture and history and things like that at different sites. And at one point, someone came to me and they were like, you could go to school for something like this, and it doesn't have to be kind of like a side gig. You could get a degree and you know, and major in something having to do with museums or historic sites or something, and really do this more often. And that seemed a whole lot more appealing than moving furniture. I mean, for any of us that have moved anything, furniture or whatever in your life, it's not something you know want to do for any extent.
Oh, you want to pay someone to do it? Yeah, yeah. It's a hard job.
It is, and so I ended up getting a master's at Texas Tech in heritage management, and through that process, I started, you know, contextualizing it all a little bit differently, learning about intangible cultural heritage and you know, preserving these sorts of arts and traditions as a way of, you know, maintaining and sort of defending the nation in a way, but you know, continuing that sort of heritage and just, you know, keeping things relevant, keeping those things going. And so that led me to working at various museums and, you know, as an educator at a few different museums and managed some historic sites for a little while after completing school. And, you know, through that, you know, I was still making bows and arrows and clubs and all that in my spare time when I had it, and doing demonstrations and things like that when I could. And then, you know, I started getting people that wanted to buy things, you know, and I'm like, oh, can we go to the parking lot and, you know, buy a bow from you, or, you know, one of these clubs, you know, do you sell things like that? And so, you know, I started doing that more and more, and realized that I'd rather be out in the parking lot selling this stuff than being in the museum, you know, doing sort of the boring kind of day-to-day kind of stuff. And really work on the craft and the discipline of doing all of that. And so really it connected me sort of to those traditional roles, where instead of just talking about, you know, traditional male roles and things like that, it kind of gave me an outlet and allowed me to participate in that by, you know, making weapons and things that I could then pass on to other people and kind of see myself in a different context. And so, so I really enjoyed that. And so, you know, it's kind of become what I'm doing until, you know, I can't do it. You know, it's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, you're putting you know, food on the table with it too. You know, you're working with your hands, and people see value in that and exchange, you know, currency for it that improves your livelihood, your family's livelihood. Yeah, that's great. You know, I guess, like, you know, when you and I first started talking about war clubs, I could tell very quickly, like, your knowledge and what you had seen and observed with war clubs was just so much broader than mine. Like, mine has been limited to, you know, what I can do through Google Food to see, you know, pictures of things in museums or in private collections or on auctions that you hope are genuine. You don't always know. And they very rarely, if anything, on dimensions, they might say the globe diameter, like the ball section diameter or the length, but they almost never say the weight. And so with your experience, both making so many historically driven designs and what you've seen in museums, can you speak to sort of the diversity of design with these war clubs, like specifically ball-headed war clubs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, you know, there are a limited number of surviving ones with provenance and all that. But yeah, as you say, there's no trading, like, you know, actually being able to handle, you know, some of these things and feel the weight and feel the balance sometimes as well, because, you know, sometimes you will get a weight on something but that doesn't necessarily tell you how it's balanced or how it responds in the hand. Sometimes, you know, that can be very different. And, you know, having had the opportunity to be in so many different sort of museums and cultural institutions was really fantastic. And, you know, my wife and I's sort of interest in things sort of overlap to a degree. I'm not going to say, you know, she's into war clubs necessarily, though she appreciates what I do. I'll say that. She certainly does. And Lord knows, you know, engage her in conversations about stuff. But you know, some of her work with museums and things as well got us out to Washington, D.C., where she did some work with the National Museum of the American Indians. So, you know, able to get into those sort of collections and things as well was fantastic. And so there's nothing, quite like, feeling these things except for making them as well. And so something that, has always struck me is the diversity. You'll see some pretty massive clubs, that you just are like, yeah, that's a weapon, man. Like this club that I made, for example, recently is I made it from a hard, they call it rock maple, which makes fantastic clubs. It's an extremely hard, dense wood. And so it's maybe 26 inches long. So it's it's a pretty good sized club. The ball diameter on this, it's like 4 inches across, and it weighs probably close to 2 pounds. It's a pretty massive club. And so, there's been several clubs that I've seen handled from like 1700s that, they're 1.5 pounds, close to 2 pounds in weight, and, pretty massive. On the other hand, there'll be other clubs that are a little bit smaller. The ball diameter on this one is clearly, a lot smaller. It's maybe 2.5, 3 inches maybe. And I've seen some that are even smaller than that. But the interesting thing is, the sort of adaptive sort of design where people would take something, the general shape, and then just apply that to, to whatever, it is that they're looking for in a weapon. And, whatever is going to suit, their personal sort of fighting style. So, I think that there's enough research to say that, yes, there were guys that made clubs for their community or were well known as club makers within their community and did that pretty often. And so a lot of their work would resemble itself. They had certain ideas in mind of what they wanted to make, similar to bow makers, guys who in the community sort of did that as their profession in a way. It helped to supplement their living of hunting and all of that. And so, they had a certain idea of what a bow would be. But then, other people would maybe make one club just for themselves, and they might have a different idea of how to do it. And so, you'll see ones that are 15, 16 inches long, and then others that, usually they don't go too long until you get out onto the plains. And that's kind of an interesting thing into itself, where you'll have guys who, societies that had been pushed from, say, a woodland setting where it was more, within the woods, close hand-to-hand combat kind of situations. And now, they're out on the open plains and on the back of a horse. And so all of a sudden the balance on the clubs change, where you don't want, such a massive ball end. A lot of times you don't want like a 4-inch ball, to hammer in if you are using it from horseback and you've got a club that's 30, 36 inches long and extremely top heavy and kind of unwieldy. So it'd make it a lot lighter, because with that really long handle you're able to still deliver quite a blow from the back of the horse, because you just have so much of that leverage. So it's interesting to see how something that was there's like sort of the general club, but there's so many different personalizations and iterations of that based on what it was that somebody was using it for. And also, I'm sure that what materials were available had a lot to say in that too, because out on the plains, there's not as much good hardwood material. You don't have like this is black locust, and you don't really have that. So guys would make it out of ash wood or out of planks and things like that, and start putting spikes in them in order to, give them more deadly effects, and not compromise, the structural integrity of, a piece of wood that maybe isn't as good as locust for, long-term use.
So on the, talking about the diversity and size, but what about some of the different features? Like, this one in my hands here, it's got a pointed pommel. I've seen others pictures of others that didn't, how far the ball is offset from the rest of the handle, and whether or not it's, what type of projection it may have, if it has any. Can you speak to some of the things that you've observed, sort of features that may differ between them?
Right. Again, I think that, and this is kind of generalizing a little bit, but you know, a lot of times with some of the clubs like that are being used for horseback and things on the plains and stuff like that, is you'll see a lot of times a more straight handle with just a, you know, a mass at the end. And, you know, a lot of the stone clubs and things are similar to that as well, because, you know, you're striking from, a lot of times they have a really long handle. You're striking from distance. You want to be able to index that strike, you know, from the back of a horse rather easily. And sometimes that's easier, you know, with a straight sort of handle versus, you know, when you're in a sort of a wooded setting and you're doing things from foot and you're fighting hand to hand, you know, it can be better to have, you know, the curve on that club allows you, you know, just more options. And so, you know, in the woodlands, I've seen a lot more sort of, you know, that aggressive forward curved clubs where you could use that for hooking, you know, use that for manipulating weapons and people's, you know, weapon hands and things like that. And so sometimes you'll see studs or spikes coming out of the end. And so with a lot of the early clubs, you know, you know, I've seen pretty short spikes and things on a lot of the ones from the woodlands, the northeastern woodlands and things. And I was wondering about that because I've seen so many on out west and in other places where sometimes they'll have like a super long spike, almost looks like a railroad spike or something sticking out of the end, or a huge spear point or something like that. And that seemed a little bit prohibitive, you know, to me in terms of fighting. Well, yeah, it's going to be extremely deadly with that one blow, but then also reading accounts of battles, as you do see that they get, you know, stuck sometimes. And, you know, there have been accounts where somebody struck a blow that was pretty vicious. It got stuck in someone, and then they just had to leave the club behind and get out of there because, you know, they weren't able to recover it. So, you know, and again, in the woodlands sort of areas, hand-to-hand fighting due to the terrain and everything was just a lot more common. And the period that we're speaking of also, you know, we're not talking about repeating rifles and revolvers and things like that. It's, you know, there's going to be hand-to-hand fighting in pretty much any battle that you look at. And so those guys were extremely, you know, advanced in the way that they conducted their hand-to-hand combat. And you'll see guys with incredible war records. There's one Abenaki warrior and leader who, you know, is said to have been knighted in France for his, you know, contributions in fighting against the English, and said to have killed 150 men, you know, with his club, and had them all marked on his club. Yeah, so, you know, he knew what designs worked and which ones didn't, I'm sure, you know, in terms of clubs. And so, you know, the shorter spikes and things like that is just what's necessary in order to, you know, strike a blow and recover your weapon. And it can make something with a smaller ball diameter like that, a lighter club. It allows you to have something that's faster, but still has that impact that, you know, a heavier club would have in terms of, you know, bone crushing or cracking sort of potential.
You know, when I think about context, you know, and we're going to get into the next question, which is where you got your idea for a wearable war club. But, you know, I do think that the Woodlands region, you know, back when they had super unreliable flintlock ignition and these other things, because of the confined space of where they had to fight in the woods and moving on foot and by canoe and fighting inside cabins, it does seem like the weapon choices they made then have the closest applicability to combatives in our modern day, because no one's fighting on horseback. You know, when you look at hand-to-hand combat, whether it's, you know, although it rarely happens on the battlefield, it happens quite a lot in the street. And it is, you know, primarily a confined space thing, whether you're coming out of a vehicle or not. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Wingard Wearables, you know, with our spike tomahawk designs, we focused on that Woodlands region, you know, where the designs had weight and size that are driving our modern wearable designs. So, you know, when you came to us, you know, with this concept that you didn't just have a concept, you had a prototype, but where did you come up with that? The wearable war club?
Right, absolutely. Well, Yeah, you're absolutely right with looking at context, and so for me, I like carrying my clubs or tomahawks or whatever it is. I like incorporating those things into my life because it's something that I do all the time, and I really, value that, that connection to the heritage and all that, having the traditional weapons and having them, not just be relegated to something that's hung on a wall, but something that I incorporate into, carrying around like an extension of the body every day and practicing with them and things like that. But of course, it's all about, as you said, it's all about sort of adapting, into the context. And so today, it's not that, a traditional club or a traditional tomahawk isn't as deadly as it was back in, 1750 or whenever we're talking about. They're absolutely as deadly and useful today as they would be then, but you can't carry them all the time, it'll certainly raise some eyebrows. And so it was something where I thought about, doing kind of with a traditional mindset, is taking some sort of design that has existed as a proven design and just adapting that to, another sort of context, in this case, more contemporary context. And just taking some of the elements and taking some of the features that, we've seen from traditional clubs and just sort of, incorporating which ones work and which ones don't for being discerning about that for the design. And so let's see, one thing that, like your club, a lot of the old clubs have a pointed pommel. And so, that gives you just, allows you to recover, as you pointed out, on your channel, and sort of, gives you another option in terms of, if you, as you said, if you miss and you come in, you have the ability to strike with the pommel. And so that was something that was important to me to like add into this sort of first, prototype that I was wanting to make. And also making something that was really light, it would be fast in the hand and also, relatively concealable as well and useful in that close context. So I've got the original prototype here, and so you can just wear it pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And so I've got the sharpened sort of pommel on this, and that was something that, like I said, I wanted to do on the original design, because the idea was that, if you're in the car or something, you can use it, sort of draw it like a pistol grip, and you're able to, transition right into, a strike, create some space. And of course, with something this size, you're not ever going to be able to fit that, concealably at your side or, in your pants or on your person in any kind of way. If you've got a ball diameter of 3-4 inches, that's just never going to work. So, so I scaled that down to make it a lot slimmer. And, there's inspiration from a lot of, historic clubs on that, where people use different sorts of pieces of wood that have, different, sort of profiles and things like that. Sometimes in the Southwest or, plains, for example, you can't get, a nice globe-headed thing, and they had different kinds of shapes and things, but still sort of harkening back to that original design. So that's what I was trying to do here, just sort of slim it down. And by doing that and reducing the mass, of course, that's when, I remembered, using sort of a metal stud or spike on the ball end can, really maximize the force of your swing into one impact point, which if you've ever seen, the tools they use for breaking car windows and things like that, all you need is that one percussive, strike. You concentrate that, and then all that force is going into that one thing. And so, so this was the original, design that I had made, and, testing it out, playing with it quite a bit. What I really liked was the speed. But we can talk more about, some of those, I guess, defensive attributes about it here in a little bit.
Well, so I have had the privilege of holding your creation when you shipped that to me. If you could give a little close up, if possible, of like, yeah, so it catches the light. Now, it is, you're just never going to convey how something feels on video, but this thing just blew me away. I mean, just the texture. I mean, you had rasped this and rubbed it down with what? Did you rub it down with antler as well, like burnish the wood?
Yeah, I like to. Yeah, a lot of times I'll rub down, clubs and just wooden objects and things that I make bows. Absolutely, all the time. I like to burnish and rub them down and just like close those wood fibers and I think it gives a little integrity to it as well. But yeah, I always do that, and it kind of gives a different feel to it.
Yeah, and I also like this is this tiger stripe maple? I mean, it's got a curly character to it. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's a maple that I had used. It was like a big piece that I had that I just use a knife and I'll like hack it down into rough shape and then take over with files and I'll take my knife and similar to what you do with the tomahawk handles, just like perpendicular with the blade and scrape them down and get it smoothed out like that and then burnish them.
And what did you use for stain and for final finish on that one?
Yeah, for this one I did I think it was either I'll use either tallow, like buffalo tallow on it, or bear grease, and then just use heat on that so that it really penetrates. Sometimes do a few coats, and then I made up a traditional oak gall stain or dye, and that's why it's a black. That's what the black color is, and so I just kind of went over the whole thing with several coats of that oak gall,
Yeah,
and then rubbed it down and sort of rubbed down the section here so you can kind of see the wood grain a little better.
yeah, you guys, I mean, it is absolutely incredible seeing the craftsmanship in hand, feeling it in hand, and also the way the camera isn't going to be able to capture it on any device. But when you see the way the grain is, especially on that maple, the way the light catches it, amazing. And you can't smell anything on YouTube, but whatever you used, whether it was tallow or bear grease, it smelled good, which is interesting. And my cats were really into it. They were following that club around. I didn't want to leave it with them because I was afraid they'd start gnawing on it. So yeah, I got that in my hand. I wore it in the pants as well, confirmed how comfortable it was. And yeah, it is incredible. Your craftsmanship, your skill is really amazing. So where do you want to go about talking about that to the current design? Like what, I guess, do you want to talk through like what do you think changed on that? Because you got this in your hand too.
Yeah. So, I mean, you handled this one, you were able to then, have some suggestions as well. And I mean, one of the things that one of the first things I think we probably both wanted to do was, I was limited in sort of the materials that I had. So the metal spike that I have on this one is it's not extremely long on that. And so I had just I had an old piece of a ramrod that I had just cut down and, and hammered into it. And so that's what I had been using. And so, I wanted to have something a little bit more aggressive as a point. I didn't really want to go to a sharpened spike because I was concerned about that, getting hung up or stuck if you were using that in a combat situation. I really just wanted it to be, flat on the end so that, so that it would have the, the percussive force that you wanted. It would be like a blunt force, which is, just sort of messier and deadlier, blunt force rather than sharp, which is why, if you get hit by a club is most times is going to be worse, than if you were hit by arrows or something like that. Mm-hmm. Sure, the arrow might penetrate your body, but from the accounts and things that I read, if you got hit by a club, I mean, that was lights out versus, arrows, which even being hit in the head, sometimes people would survive arrow wounds and things. So, so we wanted to have that sort of percussive energy to it. But we did want to keep that sort of profile where we have this hook again. It combines some of the best elements of a hand-to-hand combat weapon, which allows you to control, hook, manipulate, and sort of control, as you're fighting, while also giving you, the option again of using pommel strikes as well. But the finished product, I mean, as much as I like this one, for me, the finished product that we have in hand now, the hickory version, is got a slightly larger ball section. I think it ended up being a little bit thicker as well. And so it's really it's got more, it's a little bit more top heavy, it's a little bit more robust, I would say, than even this one. And so I'm really pleased with the way that the next iteration sort of, once we started cooperating on it, like that version that came out, I really enjoyed that one. And having it in hand it felt really good. And I was, out there beating on tires and trees and things like that too, and really enjoying that.
Yeah. And so I have the prototype in hand here, and I took your Warclub and traced it for the majority of the handle and that sort of curl over. And then, the ball diameter got bumped up to, I think it was like 2 5/8 and 2 1/2. That's one of the things I like about the traditional ball headed clubs, as opposed to like some of the modern synthetic ones you see on the market. The ball heads normally aren't perfectly round. And the eye is kind of drawn to a circle that's not quite a circle. And so yours had that. I think yours was about a 2 1/4 inch diameter, but part of it got like 2 1/8, maybe 2 to 2 1/8. And so I tried to impart that as well, where it wasn't a perfect circle. It got a lot more squared up to add more mass. And then the stud, I took a long nail that was 3/8 diameter and dremeled it down and hand filed it and got that to a sharp right angle, because you had mentioned like it really needs to bite into target to impart that impact momentum. And it required some testing, because we were uncertain with that long of we wound up inserting about 2.5 inches deep into the ball section. We had to really test that to confirm, like, yes, it is structurally stable. But that's the prototype where it is today. And I think we're hoping we will have product launch maybe into June, early January, or wait, into June, early July. I said June. It's live, right? No, we aren't doing this live, but we don't really work on a script or anything. So, so that's the current design that we're hoping to make a first production batch of. Using your design, I just really just blown away by your concept. I've had people ask for wearable, concealable war clubs off and on for since Wingard Wearables kind of got started in 2018. And actually one of the first YouTube videos I did for my channel where I rambled about war clubs, I remember saying oh yeah, they don't have a roll today because you can't conceal carry them. And I'm so glad that you have proven me wrong. This design is just awesome. So I'm really looking forward to it. Do you want, I guess we have covered sort of applications and defensive techniques with this design. I don't know if there's anything else more you wanted to add on that.
I think just, for people that, are used to, I guess, sort of the Wingard Wearables, products and weapons and things like that, and their sort of defensive attributes is, I really like that, what we have here really, it kind of fits in really well with those, and does, I think, a lot of what you did with, for tomahawks, like what it, is kind of what this does with war clubs. And I like that. I think a lot of the martial attributes and a lot of the, I think that there's overlap with, you know, some of the ways in which you can use them, like, you know, with the back ripper, something that I really loved about the back ripper, you know, is that you can, as we were talking about, you know, is you can use it from like really quick sort of, you know, just chamber it. There's no, like, you don't have to go over the shoulder with it or anything like that. And, you know, in a lot of sort of, you know, contemporary sort of combative situations, you know, speed is often, you know, the deciding factor in a lot of these things. And you see that in a lot of knife fighting tutorial sort of, you know, and self-defensive things that they do today as well. And so being able to draw something immediately, go into, you know, some sort of defensive, you know, posture, and then you can even transition into doing more with it, I think is really attractive. And being able to, again, use it, you know, with thrusts like that, and use it as an extension of your body with punches, similar to, you know, how you can do with the back ripper, is something that I think is really great, and you know, will allow for a lot of creativity, I think, with that as well. Because, you know, you always see on a lot of these martial things where they tell you, even in sword fighting and things like that, you know, that these like sort of over the shoulder strikes just leave your wrist and elbow and everything like wide open to, you know, faster combatant blows, you know, counterattacks. Or you could even get your arm, you know, pinned in against you and you have a hard time. So being able to just immediately strike and have that, you know, projection, which again is more aggressive, you know, a little more robust on the finished prototype rather than this one, is something that I really, you know, I really like, and I'm excited for it to, you know, be in people's hands.
Yeah, and I think it also provides something different too, like not just like okay, it's a blunt impact weapon instead of a, you know, a chopping bladed weapon, but one of the things that provides is it doesn't require a carry system. And as fast as our Tomahawk carry systems are for quick release, you know, not having any carry system in it is, you know, a split second faster. So, you know, I do think that, you know, compared to our Tomahawks, you know, this has a bit more reach. It's simplified in that there's no carry system that you have to bother with. It is longer. So I do know some of our customers are like, you know, 5'8" or lower in height. And there will be, you know, some leg room issues for some of the shorter people, but still it's an incredible thing. And hopefully this is you know, we're calling this the Thumper, since we have the name contest, but hopefully the Thumper is successful. And, you know, maybe next year we can come out with a new WearClub. You know, it might be shorter and heavier. It may use completely different materials, but I'm just really excited because, you know, the diversity of design and exploring those and adapting them for, you know, everyday carry, I think that's just going to be so exciting. So hopefully, you know, despite the economic chaos that's going on right now, the Thumper will get out there and get people excited.
Absolutely. I love seeing the, you know, having the WearClub sort of making a comeback, and, you know, sort of finding a niche in contemporary society as well. And I, you know, I think that's like I said, just really encouraging and exciting. And so, you know, I'm really pleased about, you know, having that sort of nod to the traditional weapons as well, which, you know, again, what you did with, you know, with tomahawks is sort of, you know, taking the spike tomahawk, making it, you know, more relevant again, bringing back that, you know, history, and just applying that to the modern day. So I'm excited.
Now, how's your energy level, Ernest?
Good.
Okay, good. All right.
Good, bro.
We're going to talk one more thing.
Perfect.
Were WearClubs thrown combat?
Okay. Well, before I say anything, that is going to get anybody arguing with me in the comment section, which is fine.
Okay, yeah. Well,
No
war clubs in North America in the Woodlands region to Plains region. We'll constrain it that way, all right? Because we know war clubs were thrown in like Fiji or some parts of Africa, but we're talking North America by Native Americans. Did they?
Right, we're talking Northern Hemisphere Americas. From what I can tell, and I mean, I'm pretty obsessive in that, you know, I'm always, you know, trying to read as much as I can. I'm always, you know, reading it, digging through, you know, probably what my wife would describe as like the most boring material that you could possibly, you know, imagine. I'm like pouring through these guys like journals and stuff like that from 16, 17, 1800s, you know, any sort of reference at all that I could find to any sort of combative situation. And also, you know, look through, oh my gosh, thousands of, you know, ledgers and robes and things like that from the Plains region as well, depicting combat. So, you know, so that, you know, I'll give my educated guess, you know, onto this, because, you know, there's exceptions to everything. And, you know, and sort of, as people will always point out in the comments, in any sort of survival kind of life or death situation, you just do whatever you have to do. Is, you know, a gun is a gun, but if somebody's coming at you, you might chuck it at them or do whatever. So never say never. But from what I could tell, it was not a, you know, a common sort of tactic in terms of combatives. That, you know, with war clubs, again, this kind of goes back to their construction and the weight. You know, with a lot of these clubs, these are hefty weapons that, you know, in the pre-European days, you know, would have been used in conjunction with shields and against shields. And, you know, there's even depictions from Champlain and some of the early guys of, you know, northeastern armor that people were wearing, presumably, you know, against missile weapons. And there's lots of descriptions of shields and things like that as well. So you needed something with heft to it, you know, if you're going to be trying to power through people's defenses and things like that. So from what I can tell in those sort of situations is, you know, this is, you have your projectile weapons, which are things like bows and arrows and that. When you come to mid-range distance, maybe there were, you know, darts and things like that, throwing spears, things like of that nature, like you see in Ireland and different places. But in terms of the clubs, just the way, you know, if it's 2 pounds or something, there's no way that you're going to throw that with enough speed at any kind of distance that, you know, your opponent won't be able to dodge something like that. And a lot of times you'll even see, you know, holes drilled in the handles where people had a wrist cord so that they wouldn't drop it, you know. And in a lot of early clubs, even with ones that are, you know, shorter than this one, they would a lot of times have a wrist cord or something like that. And so I haven't come across any accounts or anything like that of anybody throwing clubs of any kind. It seemed like tomahawks were the go-to for that.
Oh, okay, so Last of the Mohicans, 1992 movie. There's the gun stock war club that is thrown into the back of a Huron warrior.
Right.
You haven't seen anything like that then in all your historical accounts?
Outside of the film, no.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to say anything against it. I love that. I really enjoyed, you know, that movie. It's one I watched this day and still enjoy. And I love seeing what Chingachgook, I believe it was. I love seeing him, you know, throwing his club and doing that. But I've never seen clubs of that size from the Woodlands either. Yeah. And also, you know, I just haven't ever come across any accounts of anybody throwing anything, you know, other than the lighter tomahawks. And that seemed to be that once tomahawks were introduced, you know, as you've pointed out so many times, you know, lightness was favored and it allowed these things to be thrown so quickly, you know, that it was really hard to dodge something like that. And, you know, that's part of the appeal, you know, of the tomahawks.
It is pretty fascinating to think back, you know, when the metal trade tomahawk became introduced. And from the best I can tell, because there's very limited, even on the European side, written evidence, there's no account of like, hey, this is the first time Native American warriors had metal trade tomahawks. That doesn't really exist. Best we can piece together is, in the 1500s that, metal goods taken in battle with DeSoto's men were cold worked into tomahawk-like weapons. Like I've seen evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 1600s, fairly early on, it appears that trade tomahawks were a thing from Jamestown up into the Northeast. And then by the 1670s, I've seen one account from a French man writing back home, basically saying this is like from 1670s. Okay. So, which is only like a few decades after tomahawks have become a thing. And he's writing and saying, don't bother bringing your swords back here because they're useless against these tomahawks. The natives can throw them at 30 paces into their enemy's head. And so that's probably an exaggeration because 30 paces is a freaking long distance.
Yeah.
Might not be, I don't know. But it does convey that they believe, at least this writer does, that the natives were prone to throwing these tomahawks at great accuracy. And so it's amazing to me to think that, the wooden war club, which was the sole close quarters combat weapon, the primary one, as tomahawks got introduced, if war clubs weren't thrown, like how do they figure out how to throw these tomahawks and throw them so darn well? I don't know. It's fascinating. It's unfortunately lost history. But
no, that is. And I mean, I think another thing that, again, I was mentioning, I mean, the ball-headed clubs are pretty, I mean, this is a pretty symmetrical type, and if you were to cut it in this direction, obviously not in this direction. But, still, it doesn't really lend itself well to throwing it or even practicing, throwing it. Like, we have so many accounts of guys practicing with their tomahawks against trees, watermelons, different kinds of things. But, I mean, some of the clubs, like, this one, it's like this one's not even symmetrical at all, and so there was a lot of clubs like, that were used by, Penobscots and different groups up in the Northeast that, are like these root ball ones and would have all kinds of spikes coming off of them from the roots. And, there's no way you could even imagine trying to throw something like that,
there's no
clearly this is like an up close sort of weapon. And, a theory of mine too is some of these are pretty massive, and it's hard to get exact dates on a lot of it, but with all those spiked protrusions and things, I could see that being sort of like medieval bases, and that it would be able to puncture armor and things like that back when that was being used, certainly wooden armor and stuff. With a heavy club with spikes on it would would be able to do some significant sort of damage. But but as you're saying, once these tomahawks are, introduced, this is a really old historic one I put a new handle on. But once these are introduced, I mean, people are throwing them almost immediately. Somebody picks it up and they're like, I think I could throw that,
I wonder if I could hit that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, I would theorize that maybe there was some sort of weapon that fulfilled that gap. Prior to that, maybe some sort of like a throwing dart or something like that. And in some of Champlain's early drawings, it almost looks like someone's carrying an arrow or two arrows. They're extremely long. They look way too long to be actual arrows, and possibly could have been thrown or have some sort of throwing system, like I said, similar to what you'll see with some of the Irish and
like the war darts. Yeah,
exactly, war darts, something like that. And maybe once you had something like this, it's like this could be used in so many different ways, including a mid-range, filling that mid-range sort of weapon gap where you fired your gun. Now you have like a mid-range option, or you could close with it, and then you still have your club for up close as well too. And
hell yeah.
It's kind of like, but that's just kind of my theorizing.
Yeah, and there's definitely depictions of warriors with a tomahawk, sometimes a second tomahawk, and a ball-headed war club. So it wasn't like you you'll hear people today say, "Oh, never throw your weapon." Well,
Yeah.
these guys were armed to the teeth. They were clearly seemed to be prepared for doing just that. So
Right, and I mean, you'll see where the French with the English, when they start adopting some of the modes of fighting, that they're learning, in the woodlands, you see them start getting armed to the teeth too, carrying tomahawks, leaving swords behind, and carrying like 3 knives, one around the neck and one in the legging and another on the belt, and yeah, like armed to the teeth to go out, on really long, treks on foot where, you want to bring along everything that help keep you alive. That's for sure.
and they were way lighter than people think. War clubs, tomahawks, even the knives. I have a reproduction knife. It was like a double-edged dagger from that. It was like a trade dagger from that period, and it weighed maybe 5 ounces. It just was like nothing, and it was thin and slicey, and it sure as hell would stab. And it's amazing how overbuilt so many products are today. But anyway, so war clubs, disappointingly, unless new evidence somehow comes out, like some treatise on throwing war clubs from, back then, which probably will never happen, or some historic account we haven't seen, it doesn't look like that was a thing.
It doesn't. And I mean, you can also imagine, well, I know, the amount of work that goes into making them. And you will see, like, you pointed out before, where people will, sometimes carve designs onto it, or, leave ones at battle sites. Here's one that's carved with, various parts and things. And so you'll see that where, they'll, kill somebody, leave a club behind as like a calling card. But except for those sort of prescribed situations, I mean, and that was probably an extra club that was carried along for that purpose. But I mean, there's so much work that, and also it's your primary hand-to-hand weapon that you wouldn't want to be throwing it. Whereas with tomahawks, it was like they were always getting more and more tomahawks. You could have, they were relatively cheap at the time. And when, for example, some of the Abenaki were like getting together a raid to go with the French down, to raid into, what's today New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or whatever it is, before a lot of these battles, symbolically, a lot of the French and stuff would be handing out tomahawks to people, arming them. So you could always be getting more and more of them and have multiples if you wanted to. And, so certainly there's accounts of that in Pennsylvania and different areas where, in some of that border warfare where, both the colonists and the indigenous fighters and things are both throwing tomahawks. So
yeah, no, it's effective, but yeah, I am so excited for the Wearable War Club, and I hope
the WearClub.
Yes, the WearClub. That's right. We had a naming contest, which I got a few messages from sore losers. I'm sorry that you didn't win, but WearClub and Thumper, those were the names we chose. However, if the Thumper is successful, look forward to new war clubs in the future with Ernest, hopefully, chiming in with some wise design input. As we forge ahead, and hopefully we can just have a future of mini war clubs. We hopefully, and you guys comment if you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you guys did, but there could be videos in the future as this progresses. It's just going to be really exciting. Ernest, anything else you wanted to share? I actually show off some of your creations and how people can find you and buy one of your fine war clubs that you made by hand.
Well, thank you. My Instagram, like I mentioned, is kind of primarily where I am. I have a hard time. I tried Facebook. I have a hard time juggling too many social media accounts. I need to be more disciplined about that, but I'm pretty consistent and regular on Instagram. And so that's the coyote.child or coyote child, depending on where you are, what your pronunciation of that is. on Instagram. And so I'm always on there, yeah, sharing different things that I have. If I have things in my shop that I've been making, then I usually have a link you can access on Instagram if you're interested in things like that, bows and arrows and clubs and various things. So that's where I am usually sharing the latest things that have me excited about making. So
Do you have a war club for sale right now?
at this moment, we've been in the middle of moving, and so we pretty much have everything either sold or in storage at the moment.
Okay.
But I'm hoping to get back at that fairly soon. But right now, this is my number one right here.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've been enjoying carrying these babies around,
Yeah.
and putting them through the paces, and I'm just really excited to be sharing it and to finally be getting it out there with you.
Yeah, and everyone follow Ernest on Instagram, and I believe you have a YouTube channel. Or is it inactive, or is it active?
It's been fairly inactive.
I can't blame you. We have not posted a long form video since February because I'm an introvert, and I also have a busy introvert, so it's tough to get this energy. And actually, you being on this has helped a lot, because it's kind of like I haven't had to, your energy and our energy combined, we have now made a YouTube video, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's really tough to do these YouTube videos. But I will, if you're okay with it, I'll link to your YouTube channel below. If you choose to, get some videos back going, that's fine. But I'll definitely link to your Instagram below. So folks watching this, those links will be below, so you can find Ernest and see all the amazing things he's making. And I guess we're going to close out. If you are one of the 12 special people that has spent, this is probably pushing an hour. This is our longest video of all time. Make it 13 people. Share it with a friend, right? And remember to be edgy. All right. Yeah, that's right. All right. So I'm going to stop recording. I haven't stopped recording yet.